Hey everyone, I'm Rick and thanks for joining me. First, I'd like to thank you all for your support. The channel just passed 2,000 followers and I greatly appreciate you all. Today we're looking at the Topping Centaurus, and I'd like to thank Apos Audio for loaning me this review sample. By the way, Apos Audio is currently having their spring sale that's going on until March 26th of this year, 2025. And you can get great deals on this and other products. Check the link below. Onto the Centaurus. The Centaurus is a fully balanced R2R DAC. And for the Centaurus, Topping partnered with Holo Audio, who provided the R2R module. The same module in the slightly higher priced Holo Audio Cyan 2 DAC. The Centaurus comes in silver and black, and we have the black here, so let's take a closer look. On the front of the unit, from the left, we have a power and select button. In the middle, we have a beautiful 2-inch screen that I'll show you in a moment. Next to that screen, 3 touch-sensitive buttons, and finally 2 buttons to the right, an up and a down, and they navigate through the menu system. On the rear of the unit from the left, we have our analog outputs, one set on XLR and the other on RCA, followed by our digital ins, and we have an I2S on HDMI, a digital coaxial, a Toslink optical, a USB-B, an AES EBU, and the port for the Bluetooth antenna. Over on this section, we have a 12-volt trigger out and in, followed by the IEC connector and a very nice power rocker. And the build quality is very sturdy. Super solid. So I've plugged in and we'll power the unit on and we'll go through the menu system. And we'll see unlock because I don't have a source connected to the Centaurus. To go into the menu system, we can touch the top touch button, or we can select the center button on the remote control. We can then scroll up and down and select with the select button, or once again with the remote control. And I'll do my walkthrough with the remote control. Jumping back into the menu, we have our setup menu, and our first option is display. Here we can select a couple things. We can change the color on the theme. I like blue, but there's quite a few different options here. Next, we can have the home screen as normal or VUs. I prefer on normal. On brightness, we have a few options. We have medium, high, auto, which will turn your screen off after a few moments, and low. I'll have medium for this demonstration, but I usually have this DAC set to auto as I don't really like to see anything on the screen. VU sensitivity, you can have a plus 10 dB or a 4 dB. Level meters, we can select a couple different meter views and return to exit out of the display menu. Next, our input select, we have AES, I2S, Bluetooth, USB, optical, coaxial, and back to AES. Output selection, we can have the XLRs active, all, or just the RCAs. Here we can activate the 12-volt triggers. Our EQ configuration, we'll jump in there, and here we can enable or disable our EQ, and right now there's nothing loaded, so you won't see anything. Return to exit out of this menu. Next, our advanced settings, we'll jump in there. Here we have a channel balance, and we can balance left and right in half dB steps. Our output level, 4 volts or 5 volts, and I prefer the more standard 4 volts. Our DAC mode, we can use this unit as a pure DAC, or if you wanted to control your volume, you can switch it to preamp mode. I prefer DAC as I send the signal to my preamp. Oversampling modes, we have non-oversampling, oversampling, and best. And on best, the device decides what the best sampling rate would be. On the oversampling mode, you have quite a big selection. You have 2 times, 4 times, 8 times, 16, and 1. Next is I2S phase, and you can have standard or reverse, followed by DSD channel. You can swap the pins here depending on what your source sends out. Bluetooth, you can enable or disable. Bluetooth aptX, and this is an odd one. You can also choose whether to disable aptX or not. Remote control, we can enable or disable control with the remote. Button, so now here we can select what the select button on the front of the screen does. I have it to dim on screen, so if I push that button, the screen goes dark, but the other options are to mute, input select, output select, home select, brightness select, or back to dim. The USB class mode, you have USB class 2.0 or 1.0, and back to escape out of advanced. Then we have our language and return to escape out of the setup menu. As for the specs, I'll post the data from Topping site, but ASR has also tested this DAC, and I'd invite you to take a look at their video, as well as Golden Sound's review over at the Headphone Show. Now let me share with you how I use the Centaurus. For TV and movies, I connected my Fire TV via Toslink Optical to my Cambridge Audio 851N streamer. While the DAC in the 851N is now slightly dated, I love the 851N as a network streamer as well as a digital input selector. The 851N has 5 digital ins and 5 digital outs, one being an AES EBU out, which is what I prefer to use with the Centaurus. Now I also tested with the Toslink Optical and I didn't hear a difference. And I do still prefer the AES EBU connector because it is quite a bit more sturdy. And I love that it locks on the female side. I wish it would lock on both sides though. For TV watching, my Fire TV resamples everything to 48 kHz, and that's sent over to my Cambridge 851N, which shoots over that same 48 kHz over to the Centaurus. When I play music from the Tidal app on my TV, the same thing occurs. Regardless of what quality setting I have in that app, the TV will resample and send everything over at 48 kHz. For music, I have a 2 TB SSD connected via USB to the 851N, with mostly CD rips at 16-bit 44.1 kHz. And check out this little hard drive case that I got on Amazon for $12. It's in the shape of a little cassette, so super dope for my music files. And it transfers pretty fast. I can transfer music into this drive at 400 megabits per second, so plenty fast. And for playback, it's more than fast enough. I'll leave a link to this guy below. I also listen to music via Tidal Connect, which is another great feature of the 851N. And here, the 851N will send a bit of signal over to the Centaurus at up to 24-bit 192 kHz. And here's my first observation. Golden Sound over at the Headphone Show noticed a problem with the Centaurus when it's on NOS mode, so go check out his review to see what I'm talking about. He found that 44.1 kHz files had weaker performance on the Centaurus versus 48 kHz files. He also noted noise, dropouts, and higher distortion on 192 kHz files. And I completely respect that young man, and I've learned so much from his videos over the years. And I don't discount his findings, he's definitely much smarter than I am. So this is just one man's experience of what I heard. I've had this DAC in my den for over a month now, and I have not had one issue with the Centaurus not locking onto a spit of signal at 192 kHz, or at any sample rate for that matter. Not one dropout on either optical or AES. And I don't have an I2S source, so I can't speak on that. Now I did update the firmware on this unit from version 14 to the most current version, which is version 18, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Now I would like to ask, if you do own this unit, please leave a comment below and let myself and the other viewers know if you had a problem with this DAC not locking in at 192. Golden Sound's video was the first that I've heard of that problem. I do recall that for a time, maybe 6 months ago, Tidal was having some network issues and every 192 file that I try to play from Tidal Connect would definitely cause a problem. And I would get intermittent pauses and the DACs that I was testing would lose the lock. And that did seem to last about 2 weeks, so Tidal has since resolved that problem. So on to my listening impressions and completely subjective opinions. And I'll pause here to say, I'm not an expert, guys. I'm just a regular guy like most of you who likes to listen to different products and share my experience with my friends. And nothing more than that. So please don't take my opinion and personal experience as fact. Your experience may be very different. Like my good friend Ed over at Old Guy Hi-Fi, I'm just trying to share my experience for those of you who care to listen. Alright, so back to the Centaurus. The best way to describe the Centaurus sound from the experience I've had with other SMSL and Topping DACs is if Topping came out with a D90 octo, this is the sound that it would sound like. Let me explain more. And going forward, I'll say D70 octo interchangeably with the SMSL DO200 Pro because to my ear, they sound very similar. The D70 octo has this natural and relaxed sound with a wonderful sense of realism, while the D90 Mark III Sabre has this level of detail that the D70 can't match. The D90 has this super fast sense of attack, particularly in the bass, with great control. It gives you that super accurate recording studio kind of vibe. The D70 octo, on the other hand, is slightly looser in the bass, but a bit warmer. And that warmth rolls into the mid-range as well. And the highs, while not rolled off, don't have the same air as the D90. And here's where the Centaurus comes into play. On the Centaurus, the bass is deeper than the D70, with more impact and great texture. Fast, but still not as fast or as accurate as the D90 Mark III Sabre. The mids have that clarity of the D90, but with that slight bloom that R2R seems to give. And the highs, While still not as airy as the D90, are brighter than the D70s, giving you that extra sense of space. Which brings me to layering and soundstage. Here the Centaurus is ridiculously good. And it was honestly the first thing I noticed when I turned this unit on. Super refined layers, with every instrument in a distinct plane. Now not razor focused on a particular spot, but in its space going down the depth. And the soundstage is the deepest and the widest that I've heard in my system, very holographic. So I can say that to my ear, the Centaurus matches the D90 Mark III in detail. The D90 Mark III is the more transparent of the two and doesn't color the sound, whereas the Centaurus definitely colors it, but what beautiful colors. I did most of my listening on NOS mode with a few days in best, but I found myself switching back to NOS mode. My main speakers use planar mids and ribbon tweeters, and sometimes oversampling can make them lose that more natural sound in exchange for perceived detail. But I much rather prefer that realism in the sound that NOS seems to give. And regardless if the Centaurus performs objectively worse in 44.1 on NOS, I love the sound of it. On Mark Anthony's No Me Conoces, the vibrations on the guitar strings, the delicate tapping on the bongos, and the realism of the trumpet at 1 minute and 42 seconds is simply amazing. Very impressive. If I had the extra spending cash, the Centaurus would be staying right here. So it's definitely a highly recommend for me. And that's all I have for this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.